small children were killed at a water distribution point in central Gaza over the weekend, shot. These are people's babies, shot while trying to get water because they are thirsty, because their homes and infrastructure have been systematically obliterated as collective punishment to civilians for the actions of Hamas. Now, this time Israel admitted it. They say they were targeting an Islamic Jihad terrorist, but the strike, this is a direct quote, fell dozens of meters from the target. Now, I know a tiny bit about guns. I don't think they work like that. If you shoot in one direction, they don't fall dozens of meters away. That's not how weapons work. It feels to me like saying fell dozens of meters from the target is their way of saying we missed and civilians die. But trust us, we were aiming for someone else. Is there any plausible reading where that phrase makes sense, where we can accept that? Joining us today is James Robbins. He's the author of Blowing Everything Up is Beautiful, Israel's Extermination of Gaza. Thank you so much for joining us. So, James, what is your read of this? Is there any way we could accept this as anything other than direct targeting of innocent civilians?
Look, all militaries in the world operate under what's called a principle of proportionality. So that's how many civilians you're allowed to kill, or you allow yourself to kill. Now, the IDF has given itself a proportionality principle of anywhere between 20 and 30 civilians for every low-ranking member of Hamas that it targets. For even higher-ranking members of Hamas, that number goes up to even 300. Now, to put this in context, when the United States took out Osama bin Laden, they allowed a non-combat casualty cutoff value of 30. So, in a sense, even if the IDF did make a mistake with this strike, their rules and their guidelines and their rules of engagement really allow them to kill dozens of civilians at a time. And this has gone on for 20 months now. And this massacre is just one massacre on top of a giant mountain of them. Massacres like these happen almost every single day in Gaza. Some of them are accidents. Surely most of them are not.
Right. And so Israel is saying that the incident is under review, but after they killed 15 medics and denied it, and then video evidence showed that they did, in fact, execute them, they called it a, quote, professional failure. So given the propaganda spin on every civilian death that's outrageous, what can we expect from this review?
Very little. I mean, there's a very, very good human rights group in Israel called B'Tselem, and they gave up referring cases to the Israeli judicial system, I think in 2016, which is almost 10 years ago now. And they stopped referring cases to the Israeli judicial system because the conviction rate for Israeli soldiers who had killed, who had abused, who had tortured Palestinian detainees, Palestinian civilians, were never tried. The conviction rate is so low as to not matter at all. Look, the Israeli government, the Israeli military continues to carry out these massacres because they are allowed to do so by the United States. The only country in the world that could possibly stop what is going on in Gaza right now is the United States, is the American president, which is a slightly terrifying thing because that means that the whole system of international law, international norms has been completely broken, been completely wrecked. It is as ruined as the Gaza Strip is right now.
Now, I think we should remind ourselves why the Palestinians don't have food and water. We learned from what I thought was a shocking report from a group called Breaking the Silence, a report called The Perimeter, detailed how they systematically destroyed homes, agricultural land, factories, and infrastructure along the Gaza border in order to make sure that the civilians could not ever fend for themselves or live independently. So this idea that they don't have water is no accident, right?
No accident at all. It's a deliberate policy. That report from Breaking the Silence is an incredibly good report. It relies on the testimony of IDF soldiers who, given anonymity, have spoken about their experiences, and not only the destruction and demolition that takes place within that buffer zone, but also the random killings that IDF soldiers are allowed to engage in. They can shoot anyone on sight. If they are male, they are classed as a terrorist, and if they are female or a girl or a child, then who cares? It goes much further than just the demolitions and the ruining of farmland and so on, greenhouses within that buffer zone. Look, 80%, probably higher now, of Gaza's residential stock, its houses and its apartment buildings, have been systematically ruined. As you mentioned before, there was an 11-week siege in which no fuel, no food, no aid, no medicine, not even an aspirin, was allowed into the Gaza Strip. And the world hasn't seen urban hunger this extreme and concentrated since the siege of Leningrad ended in 1944. That's pretty shocking. Now, when the Israelis lifted this siege, I think at the end of May, if I remember rightly, Bezalel Smotrich, the Israeli finance minister and the most extreme right-wing member of the government, got up and said, look, we're not releasing the siege out of our own good graces. We're not doing it out of our own beneficence. We're doing it so that the world stops accusing us of violations of the Genocide Convention, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. We're doing it so that the United States continues to act as our patron, as our armorer, and as our legal linebacker. When somebody in the Israeli government gets up and says that out loud, that's impunity in operation.
Right. I don't know if you've ever read the book Let There Be Water by Seth Siegel. He talks about how Israelis have been able to thrive in their water conservation efforts, and they actually have more water than anyone else in the Middle East because they have reverse osmosis. They have all kinds of really clever technology. So the juxtaposition here of the Israelis who have this amazing access to clean water and then babies being shot for it right next door is just terrifying. I don't know how we all are living under this constant assault on our psyche, seeing it and being told that it's okay. It's not a question, but would you like to respond to that?
Sure, and it's part of the reason why I wrote the book, Blowing Up Everything is Beautiful, because it's very difficult with this subject because it lives under a shroud of propaganda and lies and misinformation, and it's very difficult for people who think that they might be sympathetic to the Palestinians and their plight, or just outraged in general that mass murder is allowed to happen in today's day and age. I try to cut through all of that. And, like the title is something as almost a direct quote, came from the Israeli heritage minister, a guy named Amichai Eliyahu. And he posted on Facebook, I think, in November of 2023, alongside a picture of a bulldozer running over somebody's house. And a bulldozer is as much a weapon of this war as missiles or bombs or tank shells. And this guy posted on Facebook, North Gaza is a treat for the eyes, blowing up and flattening, everything is beautiful. And I'm sorry to harp on the point, but again, this is impunity at work, isn't it? There's no punishment for these people for their actions. And when there is a trial at the International Court of Justice, when there are hearings, for Israel's breach of the Genocide Convention, potential breach, alleged breach, we will have to have these hearings be a refoundation of international law. They will have to be as important as the Nuremberg trials were in 1946. Otherwise, we're completely at sea, and it will be the rule of the powerful, and they will be able to kill you with impunity. That's what the Israelis are proving at the moment, and it's the reality that we're very, very quickly heading towards.
So I just picked up on a little note of optimism in what you just said, which was when this happens, because I think to a lot of us it feels like it never will. So where did you find that seed of optimism? Can you share that with us?
Well, it's not so much optimism, but it's reality. I mean, all throughout last year, there were hearings at the International Court of Justice. South Africa brought a case against Israel for breaches of the Genocide Convention. And the court ruled on multiple occasions that there were there's a severe possibility of genocide taking place, and the court issued what are called provisional measures. They're sort of court orders that said Israel should not do genocide, obviously, shouldn't incite genocide, and shouldn't weaponize aid, which is exactly what is happening now with these feeding centers, these aid stations that have been set up by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. But, in May of 2024, the court issued another one of these rulings ahead of Israel's invasion of Rafah, the southernmost city in Gaza, which no longer exists. It's been completely razed to the ground. It's gone. You can see the Mediterranean from the middle of what used to be a city. The court ruled that Israel should not go ahead with its invasion of Rafah. It did so anyway. So even if we do end up in a situation where there will be a trial, and there will be, this has to happen now, in several years' time, again, we'll have to go through this intense battle, this court battle, in which the law that we're operating under, the Genocide Convention, sets a very, very, very high bar to prove intent and to prove that genocide has taken place at all. Now, that's counterbalanced by the fact that there is an abundance of evidence, not only of direct targeted killings of civilians on a mass scale, and the deprivation of civilians of their means of existence, their means of life, their food, their medicine, their housing, their access to water. And then as well, evidence of intent, like the quote from the Israeli Heritage Minister that I mentioned before. And at the beginning of the book, I have quite a long list of other statements made by Israeli ministers and military officers to this effect. Proving intent will be quite easy.
Okay. Well, the book is called Blowing Up Everything is Beautiful, Israel's Extermination of Gaza. James Robbins is our guest today. Thank you so much for this fantastic context. I'm going to pick up your book. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you for having me.